At exactly 4:23 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text that changed everything. It was from my neighbor, Martha. The message said, "Stay home. Someone's been watching you for weeks." I sat there in the dark, half awake, staring at the screen, trying to convince myself it was some kind of mistake. But that message was real, and what I saw the next morning made my heart stop. Hey everyone, my name is Lena, and this is the story of how a single text in the middle of the night became the reason I'll never feel safe in my own neighborhood again. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from, because this story is one I'll never forget. When I moved into my new house 6 months ago, I thought I had found peace. It was a small 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, clean lawns, white fences, friendly people waving as they walked their dogs. After ending a long, messy relationship, I wanted a place where I could start fresh, somewhere I could feel safe again. I worked from home as a freelance designer, which meant I spent most of my time indoors, surrounded by my plants, coffee mugs, and my golden retriever, Scout. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, and I loved it. Across the street lived Martha Gray, my neighbor. She was in her mid-40s, warm and kind, the type of person who always had extra-baked cookies and endless advice. The first time we met, she waved from her porch and said, "You're new here, right? Welcome to the safest street in town." I laughed and believed her. We started talking almost every evening, about the weather, about my job, about her late husband who had passed away years ago. She treated me like a little sister, and I liked having someone look out for me. Most nights followed the same pattern. I'd take Scout for a walk around 9, text my mom goodnight, and lock up the house. Martha would always peek out her window as I came home, sometimes texting me, "Saw you walking in. Get some rest, kiddo." It was comforting knowing someone noticed. The neighborhood felt so safe that I started leaving my curtains open at night, just to let the streetlights in. One night, as I was bringing Scout back from a walk, Martha called out, "You should keep those curtains closed, Lena. Anyone could look right in." I smiled and said, "You worry too much. Who's going to spy on me here?" She frowned slightly. "You'd be surprised what people can hide behind a smile." I thought she was just being her cautious self and brushed it off. The following weeks were quiet. I worked late nights, had coffee on my porch in the mornings, and went on evening walks with Scout. Sometimes I'd see a car parked down the street, engine off, headlights dim. I assumed it belonged to someone visiting a friend. Other times, I'd hear footsteps late at night, but in a neighborhood with night joggers and teenagers sneaking out, it didn't seem unusual. Then came that night. It was cold, the kind of night when the air feels heavy and still. I went to bed late, after finishing a project, with Scout curled at my feet. At some point, I must have fallen into a deep sleep, because when my phone buzzed, the sound jolted me awake. I grabbed it from the nightstand, squinting at the screen through the darkness. The message was from Martha. 4:23 a.m. "Stay home. Someone's been watching you for weeks. Please don't go outside." My heart skipped. I blinked at the screen, rereading the message. For a few seconds, I thought maybe it wasn't meant for me. Maybe she texted the wrong person. I stared toward the window, seeing only faint light from the street lamp spilling through the curtains. Everything was silent. Too silent. Scout lifted his head, ears perked, growling softly toward the front door. My throat tightened. Maybe Martha had seen something, but what could she mean by watching me for weeks? I typed back, "What are you talking about?" But before I could hit send, I saw the 3 dots appear, like she was typing a reply. Then they disappeared. I waited a few minutes. Nothing. No answer. Finally, I sighed, convincing myself she was overreacting or half asleep. Martha worried about everything. Locked doors, strange noises, missing mail. This was probably one of those moments. I put the phone down, turned over, and told myself it was fine. I told myself that if someone really was watching me, Scout would have gone crazy long before now. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. I kept glancing toward the window, listening for footsteps, hearing every creak in the house like it was louder than it should be. The night felt longer than usual, stretching endlessly until my alarm went off at 7. When morning came, I felt silly for being so nervous. I opened the curtains, expecting to see the same calm neighborhood as always. The sun rising, kids riding bikes, and Martha's curtains pulled open like usual. But this time, something was off. Martha's blinds were closed tight. Her porch light was still on. And there, on the sidewalk between our houses, were muddy footprints leading up to my front steps. The night before, those footprints hadn't been there. And that was the moment I realized Martha's message hadn't been a joke. It was a warning, one that I had ignored. The muddy footprints on the sidewalk stopped right at my porch steps. They were big, uneven, like whoever left them had been pacing. The morning air was cold, and for a second, I just stood there staring at them, feeling a chill crawl down my neck. I looked around the street. Everything looked normal. Neighbors going to work, kids waiting for the school bus, a man jogging past with headphones in. But now the neighborhood didn't feel the same. The safety I used to feel was gone. I unlocked my door quickly and went back inside, locking it behind me, my heartbeat echoing in my ears. I texted Martha again. "Hey, I got your message last night. What's going on? Are you okay?" A few seconds passed. Then the message showed as delivered, but not read. I waited, pacing around the kitchen, checking my phone every few seconds. Nothing. I thought about going over to her house, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. Still, something about those footprints made my stomach twist. I tried to distract myself with work, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. My porch light was still off from the night before, and when the wind blew, I could hear the faint squeak of my back gate moving. I remembered closing it the previous evening when I took Scout out. Now, I wasn't sure if I had. I opened the back door and stepped outside. The yard was quiet, but the gate was wide open, swinging gently. I scanned the fence line and the neighbors' yards. Nothing seemed disturbed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I closed the gate firmly and went back inside, locking the door. Scout followed me everywhere, his ears twitching at every little sound. Normally, he was relaxed, but that morning he wouldn't stop pacing by the front window. Every time I looked out, he growled softly. I tried to calm him down. "It's okay, boy. Probably just a squirrel," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. Around noon, I called Martha's phone. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. I left a message. "Hey, Martha, it's me. I got your text and I'm kind of worried. Can you call me when you get this?" When I hung up, I decided I couldn't sit around any longer. I crossed the street to her house. Her car was still in the driveway, and her mailbox was empty. That wasn't unusual, but the front curtains were drawn tight, and her porch light, still on from the night before, blinked faintly like the bulb was dying. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked, calling out, "Martha, it's Lena." Nothing. The only sound was the wind brushing the trees. I pressed my face near the window beside the door. Inside, I could see her living room. A mug sat on the coffee table, half full, and a blanket was draped over the armrest of her couch. The TV was on, frozen on a paused screen. It looked like she had been there recently, but left in a hurry. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. Something was definitely wrong. I went back home and called the local police. I told them about the strange text and that I hadn't heard from my neighbor since. The dispatcher said they would send someone to do a welfare check. I waited by the window, feeling every second drag by. Scout sat at my feet, whining softly. Finally, 2 officers pulled up in front of Martha's house. I watched as they knocked on the door, waited, then circled around to the back. After a few minutes, they came back around. One of them spoke into his radio. Then one officer crossed the street toward my house. He introduced himself as Officer Daniels. "You said your neighbor texted you last night?" he asked. I showed him my phone with the message. His expression changed slightly. "That's a strange thing to send in the middle of the night. Did you notice anything unusual before or after that?" I told him about the footprints, the open gate, and how Martha hadn't answered since. He nodded, jotting notes on a small pad. "We'll keep an eye on her property for now," he said. "If she contacts you, call us right away." After they left, I tried to relax, but my house suddenly felt too quiet. Every creak sounded louder. I sat on the couch with Scout, scrolling through my phone, hoping for a text from Martha. By evening, nothing. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and gray. I made dinner but barely ate. I locked every door and window, then checked them again just to be sure. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., Scout started barking at the front window. I jumped out of bed, my heart hammering. I pulled back the curtain, and for a second, I swore I saw movement near the street. A dark shape standing close to the curb, right across from my house. The porch light from the house next door flickered, just enough for me to catch a glimpse. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, facing my house. I stepped back quickly, my breathing sharp and uneven. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stayed by the window for a few minutes, staring until the streetlight flickered again. The shape was gone. The next morning, when I walked outside, I noticed something new. A faint handprint smudged on my front window. It was low, like someone had pressed their palm against the glass while peering inside. The glass was cold under my fingertips, but the realization hit me hard. Whoever Martha had warned me about wasn't gone. They were closer than I thought. That was the moment I stopped doubting her message. Someone really had been watching me, and now they knew that I knew. After finding that smudged handprint on my window, something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending it was nothing. Whoever was out there wasn't just watching, they were getting closer. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor with my back against it, trying to catch my breath. Scout rested his head on my knee, whining softly, sensing my fear. I picked up my phone and called the police again, explaining what I'd found. The officer on the line listened carefully and said they'd send someone to patrol the area that night. It gave me a little comfort, but not much. Patrols could drive by and miss everything. Whoever this was, they seemed smart, careful, and patient. That afternoon, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went out and bought motion sensor lights and a small security camera set for my porch and backyard. The clerk at the hardware store even helped me pick out one that connected to my phone. It took me most of the day to install everything, drilling and setting up the devices, while Scout watched from the window. Every sound made me flinch. The rustle of leaves, a passing car, the creak of a fence gate. I wasn't used to being scared in my own home, but now I couldn't feel safe even with the doors locked. Once everything was set up, I tested the camera feed. My phone showed a live view of the front yard, the walkway, my car, and the porch. I turned on the motion sensors and made sure the notifications worked. It felt good to have some control again. As the sun began to set, I sat by the living room window and stared out toward Martha's house. Her porch light was still on, just like every night since she'd vanished. It was eerie, like the house was frozen in time. Around 7 p.m., I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked down the street, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It wasn't facing my house directly, but something about it made me uneasy. I watched it for several minutes before convincing myself it could belong to someone visiting a neighbor. Still, I made sure my curtains were shut tight before turning off the lights for the night. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, waiting for something, anything, from Martha. My hands trembled slightly as I opened our old messages. Most were harmless reminders and friendly jokes. Her last text, though, was highlighted in my mind. "Stay home. Someone's been watching you for weeks." Reading it again made me realize just how serious it was. I whispered to myself, "You were trying to save me, weren't you, Martha?" Around 10 p.m., I checked the camera feed again. Everything looked normal. Scout was sleeping by the door. The house was quiet. And for the first time all day, I felt like I might get a few hours of rest. I turned off the TV and went upstairs. But as I reached the landing, my phone buzzed. A motion alert from the front camera. My stomach dropped. I unlocked the screen and tapped the live feed. At first, I didn't see anything. The porch was empty, the light casting a soft yellow glow. Then, near the edge of the frame, I saw movement, a shadow shifting by the fence. My throat went dry. The figure lingered there, just out of full view, watching. I zoomed in, and the outline of a man's head and shoulders became clear. He wasn't moving closer, just standing still, watching my house, watching me. My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone. I backed away from the window and whispered, "Oh my God." Scout started barking, his deep growl echoing through the quiet room. That's when the figure moved, quickly, out of frame. I didn't know where he went, but the alert stopped. I called 911 immediately, my voice trembling as I told them someone was outside my house. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, lock every door, and wait for officers to arrive. Minutes passed, like hours. I crouched behind the couch with Scout pressed against my side, listening. The wind outside picked up, making the branches scrape against the windows. I could hear my own breathing, shaky and shallow. Then, faintly, I heard something else. A soft tap near the back door. My blood went cold. Someone was moving around the house. The dispatcher's voice on the phone was steady. "Stay calm, Mom. Officers are on their way." I whispered, "He's at my back door." Scout barked again, loud this time, and I heard footsteps retreating. A few seconds later, flashing lights illuminated the front yard. Relief washed over me as I saw 2 police cars pull up. I stayed hidden until they knocked on the door and called out, "Police!" I opened the door with shaking hands. The officers swept the yard and found the gate unlatched again. One of them came back and said, "Looks like whoever it was ran off when we pulled up." I asked, "Did you see him?" The officer shook his head. "No, but your camera might have caught something. Can we review it?" I nodded and handed him my phone. He scrolled through the footage, pausing when the figure appeared. Even on the small screen, it was clear. A tall man, wearing a hooded jacket, standing at the fence for nearly 3 minutes before disappearing. The officer frowned. "We've had a few reports like this around here lately. Could be the same person." Hearing that made my stomach twist. Martha had been right all along. Someone had been watching me, and she'd known before anyone else. As the officers drove off, promising to keep watch, I stood at my window, staring out at the empty street. The dark sedan was gone, and across the street, Martha's porch light flickered again, just once, before going completely dark. The next morning, I woke up with barely any sleep, my stomach tight from worry. I checked my phone the moment I opened my eyes. There were no new alerts, no messages, nothing from the cameras overnight. For a few seconds, I almost convinced myself it had all ended, that maybe whoever was out there got scared off by the police patrols. I brewed some coffee, trying to shake the restless fog that had settled over me. But as I stood by the kitchen window, I froze. Across the street, Martha's front door was slightly open. My heart skipped. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in with the camera. Her porch light was off for the first time in weeks, and the door looked like it had been pushed open just a few inches. I hesitated, debating whether to go outside or call the police again. Curiosity won. I slipped on my jacket, called Scout to stay put, and stepped outside. The air was cold and still. Every sound, the crunch of my boots on the pavement, the rustle of trees, seemed louder than usual. When I reached Martha's house, I called her name softly. "Martha, it's Lena." No answer. I stepped up onto the porch and gently pushed the door. It creaked open, revealing a dim hallway that smelled faintly of dust and something else, something metallic. The living room looked untouched, just like before. The same blanket on the couch, the same mug on the table. I took a cautious step inside, my phone flashlight cutting through the shadows. I walked toward the kitchen. The back door was wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze. I swallowed hard. Whoever had been in my yard might have come from here. I turned back toward the living room to leave, but something near the window caught my eye. There was a small notepad on the table. I moved closer and saw my name written on the top page in Martha's neat handwriting. "Lena, please read this if I can't reach you." My hands trembled as I picked it up. The note said, "I don't want to scare you, but I've seen a man near your yard almost every night for the past 2 weeks. He parks at the corner, walks by your house, and sometimes stops near your window. I told him to leave once, but he came back. I called the police, but they didn't find him. I think he knows I've been watching him. Please stay inside at night. Don't open the door for anyone." I felt my chest tighten. She'd been trying to protect me, and now she was gone. I folded the note and shoved it into my pocket, then hurried out of the house, locking the door behind me. I went straight home, locked everything, and called the police again to tell them about the note and the open door. While waiting for them to arrive, I opened the camera app on my phone. I hadn't checked the recordings from the night before yet. I went straight to the motion alerts around midnight. My stomach dropped when I saw the first clip. The man had come back. He wasn't at the fence this time. He was walking slowly up my driveway. He moved carefully, like he knew exactly where the cameras were, keeping his face turned away. He stopped at my porch, stood there for nearly a minute, then reached into his jacket pocket. I held my breath as I watched. He took out a small object, something that glinted under the porch light, and placed it near the bottom of the doorframe before turning and walking away toward Martha's house. I paused the video and zoomed in. The object looked like a folded piece of paper. I rushed to my front door, opened it just enough to glance down, and there it was, a small note, half tucked under the welcome mat. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was written in messy handwriting. "You shouldn't have called them." Fear ripped through me. My vision blurred as I backed away, locking the door again. The police arrived minutes later. I showed them the video and handed over the note. One of the officers looked serious. "This isn't the first time we've seen messages like this," he said. "We're going to pull fingerprints and patrol the area." They combed the neighborhood for hours. By afternoon, one of the officers knocked on my door again. He told me they'd found something, a dark sedan parked behind the old abandoned house at the end of the street. Inside, they found a backpack filled with gloves, a knife, a flashlight, and several photos. When he said photos, my heart sank. "Of me?" I asked quietly. The officer nodded. "And your neighbor, Martha." It turned out the man had been stalking both of us for weeks. Martha noticed him first and tried to scare him off. When he realized she'd been watching him, he shifted his focus entirely to me. The officers believed he had broken into Martha's house the night she disappeared and taken her somewhere afterward. That's why she never responded to her messages. Later that night, the police found him. He was hiding in an abandoned shed behind the same old house, curled up with the bag of stolen items. When they arrested him, he said one chilling thing. "I was just watching. She was supposed to come outside." The officer told me those words like they were facts, but they hit me like a punch. I spent the rest of that night staring at my window, realizing how close I'd been to danger without even knowing it. The thought that Martha had lost her life trying to save me broke me. I looked across the street at her dark, quiet house and whispered, "I'm so sorry." That was the night everything changed. The cameras, the locks, the lights. They weren't just for safety anymore. They were reminders of what it took to survive. And the truth was finally clear. Martha's warning hadn't come too early. It had come just in time. The days after the man's arrest felt unreal, like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Police cars were parked up and down our street for nearly a week. Reporters came by asking questions I didn't want to answer, and my quiet neighborhood turned into a place where no one felt safe anymore. Every time I looked out my window, I half expected to see that dark sedan parked at the corner again. The sight of it had been burned into my memory. The police told me that Martha's body had been found deep in the woods near the old abandoned house where they caught him. She had been gone since the night she texted me that warning. Hearing that shattered me. I sat in my living room with the detective's words echoing in my head, how she'd probably seen him one last time and tried to get help before it was too late. The guilt hit me hard. If I had taken her message seriously that night, maybe she'd still be alive. I couldn't shake that thought, no matter how many times people told me it wasn't my fault. The neighborhood changed after that. People who used to leave their doors unlocked started installing cameras and alarm systems. Parents wouldn't let their kids play outside alone anymore. The sense of safety we all used to take for granted was gone. Martha's house stayed empty, its for sale sign leaning slightly in the wind, her garden overgrown with weeds. I started watering her flowers just to keep them alive. It felt like something small I could do to honor her. Every morning I'd step onto my porch, coffee in hand, and look across the street at her house. Some days I swore I could still see her silhouette by the window, watching over the street like she used to. I'd whisper, "Thank you," under my breath. It became a habit, a quiet ritual that reminded me I was still here because of her. For weeks, I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of the house made me jump. I double-checked the locks, then checked again before bed. I even kept Scout's leash and my phone beside me every night, just in case I needed to run. Therapy helped a little. The counselor told me that surviving something like this meant learning to trust my instincts again, to find small ways to feel safe in my own home. It sounded easy, but it wasn't. Fear had a way of living in the corners, hiding until I turned off the lights. One evening, about a month after it all happened, I decided to take Scout for a walk around sunset. It was something I hadn't done since that night. The air was cool, the sky streaked with pink and gold. As I passed by Martha's driveway, I stopped for a second and smiled faintly. I whispered, "You'd probably scold me for walking this late." I could almost hear her voice saying, "You'd better be careful, sweetheart." For the first time, it didn't scare me. It felt comforting, like she was still looking out for me somehow. I walked further down the street and noticed a few of the neighbors sitting on their porches, something none of us had done since the arrest. They waved at me, tentative smiles, tired eyes, but a little warmth returning to the block. It reminded me that even after something terrible, life finds a way to keep moving. People heal, slowly, but they do. When I got home, I looked through the small box I kept by my bed. Inside was Martha's note, the one that had started it all. The edges were worn now from how many times I'd unfolded it. Every word was still burned into my memory. "Please stay inside at night. Don't open the door for anyone." She'd given her life to warn me, and that note had become my reminder of her bravery. The next day, I met with the detective one last time before the case closed. He told me the man had confessed to everything. He'd been watching me for weeks, parking near my house almost every night. He'd planned to break in that morning after Martha disappeared. "If she hadn't texted you when she did," the detective said, "you might not be sitting here right now." I remember just staring at him, trying to take in the weight of that truth. Martha's warning hadn't only saved me, it had stopped something far worse from happening. That night, I turned off all the lights and sat by the window, watching the quiet street. The air felt lighter somehow. I wasn't the same person I was before all of this started. I had scars, emotional ones that might never fade, but I also had strength I didn't know I was capable of. I learned that fear doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the thing that keeps you alive. And sometimes the people who seem the most cautious, like Martha, are the ones who understand danger long before anyone else does. As time passed, new families moved into Martha's house. They cleaned up the yard, repainted the porch, and the sound of laughter started returning to the street. It was strange, seeing life come back to that place that had once been so dark, but it also felt right. Martha would have wanted that, peace returning, the neighborhood breathing again. Now, every time I get a strange feeling or see something that doesn't sit right, I listen to my instincts. I don't brush it off. I don't wait until it's too late. And I tell everyone I can about Martha's warning, not to scare them, but to remind them that paying attention can save your life. So if you're hearing my story now, remember this. Never ignore the feeling that something isn't right. Trust it, because sometimes one small decision, one message, or one act of courage can change everything. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe to my channel for more true and gripping stories like this one, and comment where you're watching from, because you never know how close danger might be, or how one person's warning could save your life. And as for me, I'll never forget the woman across the street who saw the danger before anyone else did, and tried to save me, even when it cost her everything.